want to talk about in this video is the decline of journalism as I've witnessed it through my career. And I want to begin back in, I guess it was 1970 or 71 at Temple University when I took a journalism class. And I took one. I thought maybe I'll become a journalist. That might be a good idea, you know. Journalism was cool. Journalism was important. Journalism was the fourth branch of government. I thought, maybe I'll try a journalism class, see if I like it. I didn't. And that was the end of it. Why didn't I like it? I didn't like what I was being taught. I mean, my impression of journalism from what I knew, you know, was that journalists asked serious questions. Who, what, where, when, and why. Why did these things happen? And they relied on sources and documents and facts. And you wanted, you know, two sources for if you're going to make an argument, make a case in an article. You should have at least two sources, reputable, verified sources. But I took the class, and that wasn't what I was being taught. And remember, this is 1970. This is 50 years ago. And one of the things I learned about in there was what they called factoids. Now, CNN used to use factoid as like trivia, but that wasn't what the term was originally used for in 1970 in my journalism class. What was a factoid? Okay, a factoid. There's a fact. You have A. That's a fact. You can prove it. You have C. That's a fact. You have documents. You have interviews. You have sources to prove that. So you got A and you got C. But there must be a B. But you can't find it. You can't find sources. You assume there must be a B because there's an A and a C. There would seem to be a B. So that becomes a factoid. It's not a fact. It's a factoid. But you write the story as if it exists. And this is what, you know, I think back to that class in 1970, and I think back to all these instances we occasionally see of journalists making up these stories. You know, well, you know, you have a crack scourge in D.C. There must be somewhere out there some young girl who's struggling with all this, but damn, I can't find her. So we'll invent it. I'll write a story about this non-existent girl as if she actually exists. And then when I get caught, you know, I lose my job. But people say, well, yeah, but I mean, that really, you know, it's not a fact, but, you know, the narrative is the narrative, you know, you do it. And this goes back, they were doing this in the 1970s in journalism school, at least at Temple. And I can't believe, you know, Temple was on the cutting edge of left-wing journalism. I'm sure it was being done elsewhere. You know, if you have the narrative and you've got A and C, you create B. You write around B. You act as if B is true, whether it is or it isn't. But if you can't find somebody, that doesn't mean that maybe, you know, B doesn't exist. It just means you can't find it, so you need to, you know, basically generate it so you have a consistent narrative. And that's what I was being taught in journalism school. And I remember saying to the teacher, I said, well, you know, what happened to two sources? I mean, not only have you don't have any sources, you don't have anything. It's the assumption that B must exist, but, you know, B may not exist. Certainly, if I did that as a historian, you know, I'd be a failure. Although people are doing it as historians, and they make stuff up all the time. And occasionally, they actually get caught. But you wonder about all the people who don't get caught, what they're making up. I mean, I know of people who manufactured entire documentary collections that didn't exist. Or you had the guy that lost his job at Emory who came up with this thesis about guns in the early American period, and it turned out he had generated all the documents that he was quoting, you know, were out of thin air. So, you know, that was my first shock. And I remember I was in a political science class. Was, you know, the professor was saying, you know, journalism is reputable in the third branch of government. I kept saying, and I said to her, you know, I'm not sure. I said, have you taken a journalism class lately? You know, that's not what they were teaching me in that class. I learned something wholly other than what you're saying to me that they do. And I saw that in action over the years, several times. I won't go through them all. The first time is one that was most shocking. One of the shows I always loved was Nightline with Ted Koppel. I started watching it when it was, America held hostage day 13 after the Iran hostage crisis, and then it became day 150, and then eventually they made a show out of it because people were making jokes about, America held hostage day 322. So it became Nightline. And I used to watch that show all the time. I'd tape it if I could and watch it. And I thought, it was like one of the best shows on TV. And I was really pleased when in 1992, somebody who had, I guess it was my Gulf War book had come out, and they wanted to interview me in Washington. So I drove up from Greenville. I was at ECU then, and I drove up, stayed with a friend in Washington, and I went for the interview. Now, I didn't actually get interviewed by Ted Koppel. It was one of his producers who actually did the interviews. I'm not quite sure of his name, so I don't want to defame him in any way. And it was all about, for the most part, what I had witnessed when I was a historian detached for service on special forces in the Persian Gulf. So they were asking me about patrols and what we did with the little boats and the helicopters and all kinds of capabilities. And I explained that stuff to them. And you can still find it floating around out there. I think there's at least a transcript around online of the interview. But at one point in the interview, he said to me, the producer said, okay, that's all good. But now what we need you to say is this. And basically what they wanted me to say was that, well, at one point early in our operations in the Persian Gulf, we had captured an Iranian ship, the Iran Najjar, laying mines. Now, we knew the Iranians were laying mines, just like today they were attacking tankers, recently. But they, of course, being the liars that they are, they denied it. Oh, it's not us. It's not us. It's not us. It's not us. We had pretty good intelligence. So one day they figured out that they were sending out this it was a Japanese-built ship from the bin Ahmed Shah's Navy. It had been rechristened Iran Najjar in the Khomeini Navy, and it was being sent out to drop mines off. And we knew when it was coming, and we knew where it was going. So we set up an ambush with small boats, SEALs, Marines, helicopters, and they filmed the thing with night video, laying mines. So here's an Iranian ship, dropping mines into the Persian Gulf. So they're caught red-handed. And then we boarded, shot it up with rockets from the helicopters, the little used helicopters that flew around out there. These things were incredible. You would, in the dark, you would see them before you would hear them. That's how quiet they were. So by the time you saw them, it was too late that you were getting rocketed. And then the special forces went in, and the SEALs and the Marines, I think, and they boarded the ship and they shot it up, and they took a bunch of guys prisoners, Iranians, who they eventually released. And then they scuttled the ship somewhere out in the North Arabian Sea, I think. So it didn't get in anybody's way. So it was an embarrassment for the Iranians because they said they were lying about not laying mines, and here we caught them red-handed. And we had, evidence. We had a ship. We had crewmen. We had video. So it was a big deal. But what they wanted me to say was that there was a second ship we had captured, and all the crew were never accounted for. The supposition being that we had either killed them all or sent them, I don't know, to a prison camp in Saudi Arabia or something, or held them in, I don't know where they were, Poland, who knows. But that there was this second ship. So I said to them, I had a top secret clearance. I pretty much knew, actually, I knew some of the things were above top secret going on over there. But I said, I have no information about any second ship. I said, I can't say with metaphysical certainty that there was no second ship. But to my knowledge, there isn't one. And I'm not going to say on video for, a national audience that there was a second ship and the crew mysteriously disappeared and cannot be accounted for, which, looks like the, Bush administration had the crew killed. So I said, stop the tape. I said, if I have to say that, I'm going to. And so the guy said to me, this is the producer, Nightline, Ted Koppel. It's a big show, Mike. You said, you're really proud, pleased, honored to be asked to appear on Nightline, you want to still appear, don't you? In other words, the idea was if I didn't say what they wanted me to say, they weren't going to use me in the show. So I said, that's all true, but not to the extent that I'm going to say I know something that I don't know. I mean, that's lying. I don't know that. Well, can you say that it never happened? I said, no, I can't. I don't know everything. It's conceivable something happened over there that I don't know about. I doubt it. He said, well, let me explain to you. We have this on the record from, I can't give you his name, but he's a serving flag officer in the U.S. Navy. And he said that there were 2 ships and that the one can't be accounted for. I said, well, why don't you put him on? Well, like I said, he's serving. It could be his job. I said, where's he serving? Was he there or is he over here in the Pentagon somewhere? He could be some guy in some logistics desk somewhere. I don't know who he is. He said, well, just take it. He's a high-ranking officer and he's still serving, and he assures us that this is the truth. So I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm not going to do it. So he said, all right, well, that was the end of the interview, and I didn't know if they were going to use it or not. As it turned out, they did. They used the things that I said that were true, and they put my name and my picture and all that stuff, and I appear in there. But when I watched it, the night it came on, it was like, holy shit. I don't know who this guy was. I don't know if he was really a serving flag officer. But here's what had happened. When Khomeini took over, he took over the existing Iranian fleet. And the Iranisjar had, in the Shah's Navy, had a different name. It was I can't even pronounce it, Arya-Rakash, or something like that. And they renamed all the ships in the Iranian Navy. Now, we knew about all the ships in the Iranian Navy. We had records and we tracked them and everything. And the problem was, and I knew this I did know, frequently, depending on where you were or what information you had, some of our people would refer to the Iranian ships by the name the Shah had given them, some by the new name. Some of the ships hadn't even been repainted, or they'd been repainted poorly and the old names were like showing through. So it was very confusing. So some of the records, and when I wrote my book, I had discovered this, some of the record referred to the ship that we captured as the Iranisjar. Others referred to the ship we captured as the Arya-Rakash, which is the old Shah's name for it, the Shah Navy name. But it was the same ship. There weren't 2 ships. It was the same ship, but because of various bureaucratic reasons, some people referred to it as one way or the other. And apparently this senior flag officer, if he actually existed, I don't know that he existed, but whoever was the source for this Nightline thing, had concluded from the documents he saw, given that there were 2 names, was that there were 2 ships. And that while the crew of the Iranisjar were handed over, the crew of this Arya-Rakash disappeared in the records. There's no, Now, if you looked at the records, you would have seen that the number of people captured on both ships were exactly the same. What a strange coincidence, even after, given manning levels and some of the people were shot up and killed in the attack, and mysteriously both ships had exactly the same number of people on them at the end when they were captured. But the second crew disappeared. So that's what had happened. But now, if they had explained that to me, I would have told them right away, well, whoever you're talking to is a moron. He doesn't know what he's talking about. There aren't 2 ships. There's 1 ship with 2 names. There's just some confusion in the records. And I know all about that. There are not 2 ships. But they wouldn't tell me that at the time. They just said it was this mysterious flag officer. I actually don't even think it was a flag officer. I eventually concluded, I think I know who it was. He was making shit up. And he was trying to get on there. And he also shows up in there, and he's getting publicity, and he was coming out with a book. So he needed something to sell the book, and I think that this was the pitch. Now, as it turned out, when this aired, immediately the Navy was all over Nightline and Ted Koppel for, you're accusing us of this, and the reality is it's just a bureaucratic mix-up because of the 2 names on the ships. So the thing was, shot down right away, and it didn't go very far. But for me, that was like a big moment. And again, this is back in probably 1992, I think it was. And I'm thinking, here's a show that I had watched for over a decade religiously, a journalist in whom I had great faith, Ted Koppel. And here he was spreading bullshit in his show. And here was his producer trying to convince me to spread lies on national TV. And at that point, I thought, my God, if this is how Ted Koppel operates, if this is how a guy in whom I have faith and respect operates, what about all the people in whom I have no faith and hold no respect for them? What are they doing? Anyway, jump ahead. About not long after that, it was somewhere in the Clinton administration, I was at ECU, and this is goes to show you how corrupted the whole system is. A local journalist from whatever the CBS affiliate is in Greenville, or maybe it was one of the other, I don't remember which one it was, but he called me up and he wanted to do an interview. Something was going on in the Persian Gulf, and Bill Clinton was threatening to lob a couple Tomahawk cruise missiles into Iraq at Saddam. And I think eventually he did it. But they wanted to interview me as the local Persian Gulf expert, you know. So I said, yeah, sure. So they came to my office, and I think I set up, I don't think I was chair yet, but I set up in the chair's office just for space. She let me use her office. I think it was Mary Jo Brad. So I set up in there, and he gets everything set up. And this is a one-man show. He doesn't have a cameraman. This is the journalist. He sets up the camera. He chooses the backdrop, gets everything lined up, and then he does the interview. So we're getting ready to start the interview, and everything is all set up. And he says to me, okay, here are the questions I'm going to ask. And here are the things I want you to say in response. Now, I don't even remember at this point what they were. But I think there were like 4 of them. And 2 of them, you know, his responses were the same responses I would have given. But 2 of them weren't. And one of them was just, you know, not right at all. So I said to him, yeah, 1 and 2, but the other 2, I'm not going to say that. I said, that's not, you know, 1 and 2, you know, are pretty great, but 3 and 4 are wrong, or at least they're not my opinion, and I'm not going to say that. And he said to me the same thing Ted Koppel's producer said. You want to be on TV, don't you? And I thought, son of a bitch. And I said to him, no, not that much. I said, actually, I remember what I said to him. I said, I was on Nightline, motherfucker. And I said, you know, Channel 8 or Channel 10 News in Greenville, I really could give a shit, you know, to put it bluntly. And he looked at me like, oh, you know, and he said, well, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you just tell me whatever you think when I answer the question. So I said, okay, and I answered all his questions the way I thought appropriate. And then that night I gathered with, you know, my wife and the 2 kids and to watch the news. And sure enough, they had a report on, and they showed me. And basically the parts where 1 and 2, where I said what he wanted me to say, he said that. And then parts 3 and 4, you know, they cut me off, and it was him talking, saying that I had also said 3 and 4, which I hadn't said. I mean, it was just nonsense. And I thought, journalism at work in this country. They've got their narrative, and they're going to stick to it. And basically, you support the narrative or you don't. They'll either cut you out or work around you or just make up, you know, and say things that you didn't say. I never did another interview with that network again. I think it was 8, which was the time was it? It wasn't CBS. It wasn't ABC. I guess it was the NBC affiliate. I did some things with Channel 10, but then that ended too when I didn't say the right thing that one of the people interviewing me in a live interview said. She said something. She asked me a question about, maybe it was when the Gulf War started in 2003, and they said they were going to have me on every night as a, you know, local expert. So they had me on the first night when it began, and I think one of the first questions she asked me was, what do you think the impact of if Saddam goes wild or something like that, what do you think the impact will be on us here in Greenville? And, you know, But the idea that Saddam could strike Greenville with a missile, or he's going to fire a Scud at us, or what did she think? What was in her mind? And it was such an inane question that I made a mistake. I laughed. I chuckled. I said, it's not going to make any difference. I said, maybe if you're at Fort Bragg or something, or, you're at Pope Air Force Base, it is. But, sitting here in Greenville, there's nothing Saddam's going to do to us. There's no missiles, no Scuds coming in, no terrorist gangs. And the next night they told me not to show up, and that was the end of it. Not only that, I got blacklisted in the local newspaper because somebody had commented about me laughing or something, and then that they cut me off too. So, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to say what they wanted just to get my name in the paper on the local news. But that's why I don't have it. For me, journalism. You've got Sean Hannity today saying journalism's dead, but it is. But it died a long time ago. I mean, it was being executed when I was an undergraduate at Temple in 1970 or 71, when we were being taught about factoids. It's basically the narrative. That's what it's all about. You get your story, you line up all the facts you can, and the parts that don't fit, you just skip over them. White people are a danger to black people, and you run those stories. You have the equivalent of a mass shooting the last couple of weekends in Chicago and the last couple of weekends in Baltimore, but you don't report that because it doesn't feed the narrative, because they're being killed by black people. And the narrative is, white people are a danger to black people, white supremacists are a danger, white terrorists are a danger. That's the narrative today, and everything has to support that. So, and there are plenty of things that support that. Those are facts, and you report them. But when things don't support the narrative, they undermine the narrative if the numbers don't add up. The other day, Cory Booker started talking about the threat from white terrorists and talked about the numbers of white terrorists versus jihadists, and white terrorists are slightly higher. But, he begins his count on September 12th, 2001. In other words, the day after the 9/11 attack, in which 3,000 people died, almost 3,000. I mean, you add that in, and it's not even close. It'd be like, talking about, how many Americans were killed by the Japanese. We're not going to start to count till like the 1st of September, 1945. We're going to leave out the first couple of years of the war. We're going to leave out Pearl Harbor. I mean, it's inane. But that's modern journalism, and he'll get away with that because nobody's going to challenge him. Not even getting into the fact that that's only because the Obama administration considered the Fort Hood massacre workplace violence instead of a jihadist attack. When you get into all this stuff, and then there's I think as Mark Twain said, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. But this is the state of modern journalism. Like I said, it's dead, but it just didn't happen when Trump became president. It just didn't happen when Barack Obama became president. Journalism was dying in the 70s. It's just it only became obvious recently.